So we're starting Sefer Shemot, Parashat Shemot, the book of Shemot, the parsha of Shemot. Every book starts with the parsha, Sefer Bereshit, Parashat Bereshit, Sefer Shemot, Parashat Shemot, and going on to Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Dvarim, the 5 sections of the Torah. And in our parsha, we start, but we also go a little reverse. And what does that mean, starting and also going a little reverse? We start Ve'ele Shemot Bnei Yisrael Haba'im Mitzrayma. And these are the names of Am Yisrael that are going down to Egypt. Now, my mother is an English teacher. And if I would start a sentence with the word and, I would get maybe a slap. She didn't want to give me a slap, but you don't start a sentence with and. And the Torah here starts with Ve'ele Shmot. And these are the names, the letter Vav. And the reason for that is because this is a continuation of the previous parashot. The end, if we remember from last week and 2 weeks ago, there was hunger in Eretz Yisrael. Yaakov Avinu and his sons, ending with the story of Joseph, they all went down to Egypt. Yosef was almost the most powerful person in Egypt, and he was worrying about his brothers and also his father. And last week we had the death of Yaakov Avinu, we had the death of Yosef HaTzadik, and also the death of all his brothers and all of their generation. And this is what the parsha starts. Ve'ele Shemot Bnei Yisrael Haba'im Mitzrayma brings us all the different the tribes and how many Jewish people were alive in that time. 70 people coming from the tribes that we read last week of all the children and grandchildren came down to Egypt, and all of that generation had passed away. And the Torah continues that Paro really liked Yosef, and he had his as a servant. He was taking care of the food in Egypt. He was taking care of if you remember, the dreams of Paro with the 7 years of that they would have a lot of food and another 7 years with hunger. And who was in charge of dealing with this whole aspect, right? You can think of, in Israel, they have the vaccines for the corona. And giving the vaccines, it's a whole operation. And there needs to be someone, a projector that is going to take care of everything. So Yosef HaTzadik, he was the person that was in charge in Egypt. But the Torah tells us, Vayakom melech chadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yada et Yosef. There was a new king that came upon Egypt, and he didn't know Joseph. And Rashi brings 2 explanations. One explanation is that physically, a new king has come to Egypt, and he really didn't know Joseph. And the different explanation is, no, it's the same Paro, it's the same king, but he had a twist, and now he's not so friendly for a good word with Joseph. And because he sees that Am Yisrael are very few, he starts and they become slaves to the Egyptians, they become slaves to the king of Egypt, and he puts on taxes, and they build him cities at Pitom ve'et Ramses. And one very, very, very horrible thing that he puts on the Jewish people, every child, a boy that is born, where does he need to be thrown? Into the water. V'chol habat techayun, and the girls keep alive. But there were also 2 righteous women. There were 2 meyaldot, 2 ladies that the explanations say that was Shifra and Pu'ah, and they were delivering the babies. And they decided, no, we're not going to listen to Paro. We are connected to Hashem, and we believe in Hashem. And we're going to say a few more words at the end, the second part, about these wonderful and powerful women that because for their strength, their believement in Hashem, that's how Am Yisrael continued to have more generations. Because if they would listen to Paro, that's it. There would be only girls left, and Am Yisrael couldn't continue to have children and become a whole nation, as Paro will be the first one calling them as a nation. And that's how the first section of the parsha ends, with these 2 ladies, Shifa and Puah, which delivered the babies, and they have believement in Hashem. And because Hashem saw that these two ladies that they had believed in Hashem and weren't listening to Paro, then Hashem decided to greet them and to give them some kind of present. And in the future, what was their present going to be? They would have houses, and not just a physical house, but a kingdom. And these two kingdoms are going to be very, very major people in Am Yisrael. And we're talking about the Bait, the house of the Kohanim and Leviim, and the house of the kingdom, Malchut David, Malchut Shlomo, that we'll have in the future. And what came out of whom? The Malchut, Kehunan Leviyah, the Kohanim and Leviim came out of Yocheved, that we all know Yocheved was Moshe's mother, and Malchut, and the Malchut, the kingdom, came out of Miriam, which was Moshe's sister. And after Paro sees that it's not working only for the Jewish people, Paro decides to get even more angry. And he says, okay, if that didn't help just to kill the boys of the Jewish people, let's also do it to the Egyptians. Now, what crazy person would decide to kill his own nation? Only someone that is so mean that he wants to just do horrible things for a specific group, for a specific nation. In order for that to happen, he's willing also to sacrifice his own people. And that's what Paro does. He also puts these same three things on his own nation. And at the end of this a part of the parsha, the second part, we have the born, Moshe Rabbeinu is born. Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of the leaders of Am Yisrael, is now born in Egypt. And his mother decides, she sees something very special. She sees some kind of light surrounding him. So she goes and hides him for 3 months. And after 3 months, the child starts screaming, starts crying louder, doesn't sleep as much as a newborn. And she realizes she can't hide him anymore. The Egyptians will come and find him and will kill him. So she puts him in a small ark, puts him in the river, and looks at the river with Moshe Rabbeinu in it, floating away. Then Moshe Rabbeinu gets to the other side of the river. The daughter of Paro finds her, and also Miriam, Moshe Rabbeinu's sister, also looks at what's going to happen to her younger brother. And then Miriam and Bat Paro speak, and they go, and finally, she is the one that gives Moshe the name. Ki midamayim mishitihu. I pulled him up from the water. It's called mishitihu, limshot, mishu me'amayim. And the word mishitihu has some kind of similarity to the name Moshe. And Moshe grows up and he decides to do a judgment on his own. And what judgment did Moshe do? And the Torah says that Moshe suddenly saw two people fighting, an Egyptian and a Jewish person. And what happened there? Moshe comes and he hits the Egyptian, he kills him and buries him in the sand. And he decides to do a judgment for himself, which is not a good thing. And he thought that no one saw. So suddenly, a day later, he saw another two people fighting, but this time it was two Jewish people. And he comes to him and says, Lama takere'echa, why are you hitting your fellow? He's your own fellow. You're both Jewish. And then one of them says, do you want to kill me like you killed the Egyptian yesterday? And Moshe realizes that he's getting into some kind of trouble. He saw that someone saw him killing the Egyptian. And it got all the way to Paro. Paro heard about Moshe doing a judgment for himself and saying, I'm going to kill this Egyptian. And Paro decides that he wants to punish Moshe Rabbeinu. So what does Moshe do? He goes, runs away to Midian, gets to some kind of pond and waits there. And then there are these 7 daughters of Midian which come with all their cattle to let them drink. Moshe helps them take out the water from the well and they go home. and their father Reuel, which he has 7 names, and in our parsha we use some of the names. Sometimes we use Reuel, sometimes we use Yeter, sometimes we use Itro. Maybe we all know him as Itro, which we have the 10 commandments that we're going to be reading in just a few weeks. The name of the parsha is Itro. This is the same Itro which will turn out, we'll see soon, Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law. And really, Moshe Rabbeinu marries one of his daughters, Tzipporah, and they have a son, Gershom. In this case, the king of Egypt passes away, and people that are being slaves and they're working really hard, when they see that this king that had been tortured, they've been tortured by him, passes away, what do? They're happy. Baruch Hashem, they can celebrate. The king died, but not so fast, because another king came upon and wasn't so better than this one. And the fourth part of the parsha, Moshe gets to Har Chorev, and the famous story of the fire that is burning and is not getting out, and it's called a sneh. And Moshe goes there, and suddenly he hears someone speaking. Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha ki hamakom asher ata omed alav admat kodeshu. Take your shoes off from your feet, because the soil that you're standing on it right now, it's a holy soil, it's a holy place, and that will turn out to be Har Sinai, that Am Yisrael receives the Torah. But for now, it's a regular mountain. But Moshe sees a miracle. There's a fire there, and the fire is just continuing to burn without coming out. And Hashem suddenly speaks to Moshe, and Moshe hears this voice. He doesn't understand. What is he hearing? And he says, I am your God. I am the God of Avraham, of Yitzchak, of Yaakov, your forefathers. Over there, it wasn't so many generations. We feel we're talking about 4,000 years back. But think about Moshe Rabbeinu. If we speak about Avraham, Yitzchak, or Yaakov, it's just his maybe great-great-grandfather. That's all. It's not so many generations back. And Hashem speaks to him and say, I am your God of your Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and I need you to be the commander, to be the leader, to go and take Am Yisrael out of the Galut, to take Am Yisrael out of the exile that they're in, out of Egypt, to save them physically, and not less important, spiritually. Moshe Rabbeinu was in shock. Who am I to go and speak in front of the king of Egypt? And when you understand Egypt was an empire, who am I going to speak in front of the king? I can't even speak to you. Well, I can't really make this equal, because you're speaking now to the God, but to Hashem. But to go and speak in front of the king of the empire, who am I that's going to do that? And Hashem says, I am commanding you. I am appointing you as the leader. You are going to be the leader. I will give you the blessing. I will give you also signs that we'll see in a minute. What are those signs that he's going to show them? And he goes and he tells Moshe Rabbeinu, go to the king of Egypt and ask him, let my people go for 3 days to the desert to go and sacrifice to Hashem. And Hashem promises Moshe that when Am Yisrael will leave Egypt, they're going to leave with full hands. They're not going to leave as poor people. They're not going to leave as junkie people. They're going to leave, as the Torah says, biyadayim meleot, in full hands. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, okay, you know what? I'll go to the king of Egypt. I'll ask him for permission to go out. But then I'll go to Am Yisrael, and Am Yisrael will start asking me questions. What are you making up? Because we know, as we said, this is a different generation. This isn't the sons of Yaakov anymore. It's not the grandsons of Yaakov anymore. It's a different generation. They don't know who Hashem is. What they know is that they're slaves for the king of Egypt. And Moshe Rabbeinu asks Hashem a really good question. Why should they believe me? Some kind of person coming, say, I spoke to your God. Who are you that you're going to speak to our God? What God are you talking about? And Hashem says, you're right. Maybe they'll ask those questions, and that's why I'm going to give you 3 signs to show them if they don't believe you. The first sign, Hashem tells Moshe, you have a stick in your hand, throw it to the floor. He throws the stick to the floor and it becomes a snake. He says, pick up the tail of the snake. He picks it up and it becomes a stick. It becomes the staff of Moshe. The second point, sign that Hashem tells Moshe to show Am Yisrael is, put your hand in your pocket and take it out. And when you take it out, it will be white, like a metzorah that we know that also Miriam Hanvi'ah was also a metzorah. She got this illness that you have that it brings white dots over it. And this metzorah we learned from Miriam Hanvi'ah because she spoke lashon hara. She was bad talking about other people, and that's why she got that punishment. And Hashem shows this sign to Moshe for some kind of reason. He says, be careful with your speaking. Because also you just had a small speak of lashon hara. You're speaking about Am Yisrael, saying, why should they believe me? Wow, why should they even believe in you? Hashem tells Moshe, and also a sign, not just to show Am Yisrael later on, but also a sign to show Moshe, be careful with what you talk, because you could also get the illness of the metzorah. And the third sign, and after, if Am Yisrael doesn't receive and are not acceptable for these two signs of the staff becoming a snake and your hand becoming white, the third sign is, take water from the river, pour it on the ground, and that water will become blood. And that's how we add those three signs and the fifth section of the parsha. The sixth section starts with Moshe Rabbeinu goes back to Egypt and asks permission from his father-in-law. And on the way, he comes to a hotel, a malon. The Torah says a malon, and that's a hotel. And an angel comes to Moshe and wants to kill Moshe. And the Midrash brings down that some kind of snake opens its mouth and catches Moshe all the way up to the waist from the feet, and then goes around and starts from the head and catches Moshe up to the waist from the head. And Tzipporah, Moshe Rabbeinu's wife, understands for some kind of reason. The reason is Moshe Rabbeinu did not do a brit milah for his son, and that's why this angel wants to come and kill Moshe. So what does Tzipporah do? She takes a stone and she goes and does a brit milah for her son Eliezer, her second son of Moshe. And the reason that the Midrash brings down that Moshe doesn't do a brit milah is because it says, I'm going now. Just like in we'll learn later on in the desert where Am Yisrael did not do a brit milah because they were always afraid. Doing a brit milah is not something simple. A person, the child needs to rest. You need to make sure you take care of the child after the brit milah because he's an illness. He just went over an operation. But in every minute, every day, someone is going to start walking that's not healthy for the child. So as Moshe Rabbeinu, he was scared that any minute Hashem was going to tell him, now go back to Egypt. So he didn't want to take the chance to do the brit milah, and just a minute later, needed to start traveling back to Egypt. And on the way to Egypt, he meets his brother Aharon. And the parsha ends with the meeting of Moshe and Aharon, and Moshe speaks to Aharon and tells him everything that happened with the talking to Hashem. They go in front of Paro, they tell him everything, let our people go for 3 days to go sacrifice in the desert. Paro refuses to Moshe Rabbeinu, of course. And not just that he refuses, now Paro gets angry. And when Paro gets angry, when someone evil gets angry, and you don't have the stronger hand, you're in trouble. And Paro decides, make the work harder for Am Yisrael. If until now you would give them the cement ready, now they need to go and make the cement by themselves. If until now you would give them the bricks, now they need to go and create the bricks to build these cities, whatever Paro wanted. Paro made the slavery upon Am Yisrael so much harder that Am Yisrael came to Moshe and said, Moshe, who are you? You're making us work harder. You're making our slavery. We're being slaves on such a harder situation than what we had until now. And Moshe was frightened. And he said, you're right. He goes to Hashem and he says, Hashem, what's going on? You told me to go to Paro. I did whatever you did. Why is Am Yisrael being tortured even more? And Hashem answers Moshe, and this is how the Torah ends the parsha with this last pasuk. Hashem tells Moshe, just wait and see. Wait and see. Vayomer, this is the last pasuk, just going to read it. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, ata tir'eh asher e'aseh lefaro, ki biyad chazaka yishalechem ubiyad chazaka yigarashem me'aratzo. Hashem tells Moshe, just wait and see. Maybe now Paro thinks he's stronger than Am Yisrael, but just wait. Because in the situation, at the time when Am Yisrael is going to leave Egypt, they're going to leave with their hands on top. They're going to leave with their heads above the water. They're going to leave with respect and whatever they need, because they will be stronger and have more strength. That is the overview of the whole parsha in very, very fast fast points, quick points that we just brought from all the sections of the parsha. And now just go in for a few minutes of two aspects. The name of this Chumash, as we all know, it's Chumash Shemot. We all have the famous names of the Chumashim, Bereshit, Shemot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Dvarim, and now we're starting Bereshit, and now we're starting Shemot. But the Midrash brings a few more names of for this Shemot. Some say it's Sefer HaGeula, Sefer HaGalut VeGeula, the book of the exile and the redemption. Why? Because Am Yisrael is going down to Egypt, which is the starting of the exile of very long periods of time in Egypt. And later on, after a few hundred years, they're gonna be at the redemption. They're going to have Geula. They're going to leave Egypt. They're going to get the Torah. So some say this is the name of Sefer HaGalut VaGeula, the book of exile and redemption. But one of the Geonim, the Bahag, he brings down that he calls this book the second book. Now you would ask, okay, it's very simple. It's the second book. Probably he called the first book, second book, third, fourth, fifth book. But no. The first book, what we just finished, he calls Sefer Bereshit, like it's named, the beginning. That's how Bereshit starts, at the beginning. This book, he names Chumash Sheni, the second Chumash. Sefer Vayikra, the third one, he names Sefer HaKohanim because it deals with everything and Bet HaMikdash and all the sacrifices of the Kohanim. The fourth, Chumash Pkudim, the numbers, and the fifth, Mishneh Torah, the end of the Torah. But in that case, why does he name Chumash Sheni, this book, as the second book and not another special name, just like he did with all the other books? The Ha'amek Davar, one of the explanations of the Torah he brings, he brings the reason that this Bahag, this Gaon, this rabbi that calls it Chumash Sheni, for the reason is because this isn't really a separate Chumash of the Torah. This is actually a continuation of the first one. Bereshit, at the beginning, Hashem created the world for who? Bereshit bishvil Israel shenikru Rashit. The only reason that Hashem created the world was for Am Yisrael. One of the reasons was for Am Yisrael that are called Rashit. And Am Yisrael, starting from Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, we had wonderful stories with them, but where is Am Yisrael now? Am Yisrael now is in the exile. They're in Egypt. And that means that the Am Yisrael that Hashem created the world for, they aren't in their correct place. They're not at the stage that they are supposed to be. That's why he brings that this is not a book in front of itself, but it's a continuation of Sefer Bereshit. It's a continuation of the newborn. It's a continuation of the born of Am Yisrael, which started with Abraham it didn't end with Yaakov. It's continuation to our book. And that time, when will that time and Am Yisrael will be its nation? That's in just a few weeks when Am Yisrael will receive the Torah on the Sinai mountain. So why does he call this book Sefer Sheni, the second book, and not a name because itself? Because this is the second book after the first one, because it's just a continuation of the story of Am Yisrael being born. Another idea of about this parsha is we have a few sentences for the reasons that Am Yisrael got out of Egypt. One of them is בזכות האמונה נגאלו ישראל ובזכות האמונה עתידים להיגאל. Because Am Yisrael had faith in Hashem, they had redemption from Egypt, and because Am Yisrael, and in the future when Am Yisrael will have faith in Hashem, they will also have the big redemption that we're waiting for. But another one is בזכות נשים צדקניות נגאלו ישראל ובזכותן עתידים להיגאל. Another reason that Am Yisrael had the redemption from Egypt is because righteous women, because the righteous women that there were in Egypt, that is one of the reasons that Am Yisrael really got out of Egypt. And which righteous woman? Only in our parasha we have righteous women that we're talking about. Of course, we have Shifra and Puah that we read about, that they didn't listen to Paro, to every boy that was born, to throw him into the river and kill him. They had faith in Hashem. They weren't scared of Paro. They weren't scared about anything. Whatever was in front of their eyes is Hashem. And another, we have Miriam, Moshe Rabbeinu's sister, Yocheved, Moshe Rabbeinu's mother, which she was supposed to also. What did she do? She took the sacrifice. She took the chance that the Egyptians will find her hiding her son for 3 months, and also the wife of Moshe, Tzipporah, which also saved Moshe by doing the Brit Milah, like we spoke about, Bizchut Nashim Tzadkaniyot, because of righteous women that were in Egypt, and there were continuation, they had the power to continue Am Yisrael, because the men had no strength. The men of the Jewish people in Egypt, they had no strength. They were working so hard. They were working every single day, all day long. They had no strength. They didn't want to have kids. They didn't want to continue their lives. They didn't want to have a continuation for themselves. But the women, their wives, said, no. We have believement in Hashem. So right, you're working hard. You are the slaves. But we have the power, the spiritual power to go and continue Am Yisrael. And really, because the power of the woman, starting with these women that we read about, but every single wife, every single woman in Am Yisrael in the times of Egypt, because they had the power, because they had the strength and the believement in Hashem, the fullness believement, and they were helping their husbands. The Midrash brings down that while the men were working so hard, the women, they would bring them water to drink, they would bring them food, in order that they'll have some kind of continuation, that they will want to continue their legacy and continue Am Yisrael, which is the nation of the world. And I had another idea, but we're running out of time, so we'll say that maybe for next week. But just a question we can ask, and even if I'm not going to answer on it, you can even think about this on your own. The pasuk in Sefer Bereshit, in Parashat Bereshit, the first parsha of the Torah, it already tells us that Am Yisrael is going to be in exile, and there are 4 big exiles. One of them is Galut Mitzrayim, another one, Galut Yavan, the Greek, another one is Galut Edom, and the question is, Hashem created the world in the future that Am Yisrael will be in exile. And we would think that why is Am Yisrael going to exile? Because they were punished. They were doing sins, they got a punishment, then they will be in a land that's not theirs, and they will be in a country that's not their own, because it's a punishment. But if we say it's a punishment, when Hashem created the world, who had the punishment? Adam HaRishon, he ate from the tree of knowledge, even though he was tested and he was ordered not to eat from it. And if he wouldn't eat from it, our lives would be in heaven. We will all live in heaven. But we can blame the first man, Adam HaRishon. He ate from the tree of knowledge, and that's how the world continued with the plan of Hashem creating the world. But already in the plan of Hashem creating the world, Am Yisrael was supposed to go in exile. Am Yisrael is supposed to be the smallest nation upon the world. But remember what we said. The reason that Hashem created this world is for Am Yisrael. So why? If Hashem created this world for Am Yisrael, why couldn't he do the majority of the people of Am Yisrael in the world? Why did he need to plan that maybe the majority of the years Am Yisrael will be in exile? If it's not for a punishment, it's all from the plans of the creation of Hashem. And just that could be a question that you can think of, but just a nice answer of, we're just a few. We're not, right? There are about 15 million Jews in the world. But these 15 million Jews, it's just like a soul in a body. A body, you have a head, hands, feet, stomach, back, and you have a soul. The soul is not seen, but if a person, as we all know, will not have a soul, he will die. Same as Am Yisrael. If Am Yisrael will not be in this world, the world will go vanish. The world will vanish. The world will be destroyed. The world will go back to the time before it was created. Just like the neshama, a guf lelo neshama, a body without a soul, is just like the world without Am Yisrael. A body without a soul is nothing. It's so nothing that we bury it under the ground. Same as the world. If the world is without Am Yisrael, the world will be buried under the ground. Or try to understand, because there won't be ground, because there won't be a world. That's one of the answers, that Hashem created the world for Am Yisrael. And even though Am Yisrael is in exile for a majority of time, that has a few answers for that we won't go into now. But the question is, why is Am Yisrael so little? Because even though maybe they're not seen, maybe we are attacked several times, but there's no question that Am Yisrael is the heart of the world, the soul of the world. And if Am Yisrael won't be, then there won't be a world. And just to end, as we said, the third part, just to give an halacha of about Shabbat, we spoke about the righteous woman that we had in Mitzrayim. So we'll bring a halacha that has to do usually with women, but if there isn't a woman in the house, then it also includes of men, having to do with Shabbat. Bringing in Shabbat is the time, a holy time, a spiritual time that is done with an action of lighting candles. There are three main reasons for lighting candles on Erev Shabbat. One of them is to lichvod Shabbat, because we're going into a holy day, a spiritual day, a day of that we slow down, that we rest. Then we bring in the Shabbat with the light, so we'll have more light in our house. The second reason is for joy. Usually when someone sees a candle lit, he has some joy. And the third reason is la'asot shlom bayit, to have peace in the house. And what does peace have to do with light? So especially here in Durban, we have load shedding, right? We don't know when there's going to be a load shedding. And it could be that there's going to be a load shedding right at the Shabbat comes in, and you're going to go to the kitchen to get something from the blech, and you're going to come back and you're going to hit the wall. And then you're going to say to your wife, oh, why didn't you do this and this? But if you light the candles, the fire, the candles before Shabbat, no load shedding in the world can have more power than just one small wick of candle, of the Shabbat candle. Bringing in the Shabbat with light, with more light in the house, with more light in the world is such a wonderful thing. We won't go into the reason into too many reasons of that now. Just going to go into the halacha of how many candles, what needs to be done. The mitzvah is to light one candle. That is the mitzvah of to light hadlakat nerot. Now you're probably asking, so why does my wife or why do I light 2 candles or 5 or 7 or 3, as many as my children? So those are already different traditions, but the mitzvah is to light one candle, which means if someone usually lights 5 and this time he has only 3, he's not going to say, okay, I don't have 5, I'm not going to light. The mitzvah is to light one candle, as we can see in the bracha that we make before we light the candle. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kideshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu leadlik ner shel Shabbat Kodesh. Ner, one single candle, not in plural, only one single candle. There are a few traditions that people do. Some light 2 candles, one for Zachoret Yom HaShabbat, one for Shamoret Yom HaShabbat. Some people light 10 for different reasons of the 10 commandments or other reasons for the number 10. And another, maybe the most tradition, is to light as many candles as a person has in his family, has the parents and the children. And if someone has 3 children, so 5 candles, and then going on. That is one of the main traditions that are brought down. If someone is stuck without a candle, what does he need to do? So if someone doesn't have a candle, then there's nothing to do. But then came the electricity, and the question was asked, can I make a bracha on the electricity? Can I make a bracha and turn on the light in the living room or in the kitchen? And the poskim, the later rabbis spoke about this question, and brings down that if the electricity, if the light that you turn on is a light that has fire, which means the wire is a wire that attracts fire, and not just some kind of like a fluorescent, which does not attract fire. So only something that has fire in it, or that has some kind of wire with fire. On that kind, if you do not have a candle, you can make a bracha before you light that, and that will be considered your Shabbat candles. But again, that's only in a time where a person is stuck with no Shabbat candles or stuck with no wicks, in those kind of times. And next week, Bezrat Hashem, Thursday evening at 7:30, we'll be back here with Parashat Va'era, starting with the hit that Hashem brings upon the Egyptians. Should all have a Shabbat Shalom, keep safe, and have a great weekend.